Sanji has always been the most perceptive Straw Hat. Whether it be seeing through a contraption, foe, or lies, he always sees a little further than the rest of the crew. So it only makes sense his specialty of hockey would be in observation. He can see through ploys, through surprise attacks, and especially through false words. But he can't see his past creeping back, not until it sits among him at the devil's dining table. His past that he shut his eyes from long ago returns to make him close them again, this time toward his future, thus rendering him blind in the present. Sanji loses his acute observation, and he would not regain it until he is forced to confront the past he refused to look at. Not simply confronting the people who make him blind, but confronting the thing he saw even less than them, himself. He'd sacrifice his dream, sacrifice his life, but he would never sacrifice others. Why would he? Zeph gave him salvation. The Straw Hats gave him a path toward his dream. But as for Sanji, what can he do to compensate? How can he pay back two priceless pieces of treasure? He once said everyone has things they can and can't do in an effort to lift Usopp from his rut. But more than anyone else, those words should have been directed at himself. He always tries to do too much. Not a shield, but a sacrifice. Zoro commits to fulfilling his role as vice captain when he lays down those swords. Sanji commits to fulfilling his role as a failure when he stands in front of him. A martyr for Luffy's future. He doesn't attempt to believe in survival like the man he tries to replace. He looks to use his life instead as repayment. But why? Why so transactional when we know this chef to be more emotional than all others? Well, it's because he has passion for everything but himself. He cooks to feed others, fights to defend others, and limits his potential to not upset his true father. Sanji won't use his hands and he won't kick women, not to maintain his own status, but to keep the status of his savior alive. He will never forget that debt he owes. And to Luffy, he owes just as much. Through Zeph, Sanji found a father, and through his captain, Sanji found a family. These irreplaceable things he doesn't deserve, because he never once proved his might when among the mighty, and he left his new home before he felt his savior repaid. He ran away from his past, and he turned his back on the present to chase the future. This is who he is. Of course, not to anyone else. However, when Sanji looks at himself, he doesn't see a man that can't do some things but can otherwise do many. He sees a man who didn't match up when it mattered most. These mental gymnastics are most apparent when Sanji apologizes to Nami for losing to Khalifa. He doesn't confide that he can't hit her because of Zeph's prized lesson. He laments for being too weak to finish the job. A bold-faced lie. And these lies would only become more bountiful in Whole Cake Island. He lies to himself, lies to others, and can no longer perceive lies. A man blinded by self-sacrifice. It's the easy road, after all. Not acknowledging himself, not acknowledging his true desires. To Sanji, it's second nature, and it's far too difficult a habit to break alone. He resists Luffy, not because he doesn't trust in his success, but because he views himself to not even be worth the risk. But Luffy's selfishness would not allow Sanji to be selfless. So, he makes it not just about Sanji's life anymore, but his as well. If you don't come, I'll starve to death. Words this captain knows will compel his cook to act. It doesn't matter his circumstances. Sanji is selfless enough to feed a person through any storm, and Luffy is selfish enough to use this against him. Not to exploit his trademark, but to give him the push he needs to gaze at what he's been missing in favor of everything else. Himself. And, for the first time, Luffy backs Sanji in a corner and forces him to be selfish. He compels him to acknowledge himself. Sanji can never repay Zeph's kindness. He can never repay the opportunity Luffy gave him. Yet, that was never the point. People only think this way when they see themselves as valueless. But despite his acute sense, Sanji never saw that he gave both Zeph and Luffy something equally valuable. In Sanji, Zeph found a son. And in his cook, Luffy found one of his wings. A person that will enable him to soar beyond the current world's horizon toward a new dawn. And so, this simple proclamation that exclaims inward recognition enables Sanji to see even more than before. He stares down his past, faces it, and resolves it, all while staying true to his core, his innermost selfish desires. He wants to save his family despite hating them, wants to feed Big Mom despite her being an enemy, and needs to endanger his crew through it all to make it happen. He ceases to shy away from his true wishes in favor of everyone else, and through this visual clarity, Through these passionate, selfish acts, Sanji receives another boon unexpectedly. And while he may have forgotten, the action's impact will never fade, because attached to it is hopefully a future promise, one that will be fulfilled after Sanji actualizes his dream. A paradigm shift drops into the mix. The introduction of Stealth Black sets an interesting precedent. Sanji's logic is sound when he reluctantly decides to use the suit. Furthermore, it's an upgrade. Putting it to use is a no-brainer. So what if it comes from his family? As long as it enables him to be what he's always been, but better, why not turn something negative from his past into a positive aid for his friends? And this logic is consistent when looking at the only time Sanji uses the suit. Against Page 1, he sought to protect the citizens he put in danger, and against King, he donned Osoba mask once more to save Momonosuke. Well, there is this time too, but even this instance ends with Sanji making a rescue play. In each battle Sanji uses the raid suit, it's always solely to defend others, and when given multiple opportunities against Queen to transform, something that would surely make this fight easier, Sanji refuses. Because if it's just for his own sake, he can't swallow his pride. Ironic when you think about his bombastic decree not long before this. A plea to a friend, a selfish request, but completely capturing the progression he achieved in the previous arc. He vocalizes the newfound value he sees in himself, and finally acknowledges the things he can and can't do by allowing not only a weaker crewmate, but a woman, to face danger. Sanji asks for help, and he receives it in full. A complete 180 from his words to Nami back in Eni's lobby. However, the sudden shift in mentality when the raid suit is in question paints a more complicated picture. Sanji is still haunted by his biological ties. No longer does he let those childhood memories define him, sure, but all the more reason why he doesn't want to resemble even a sliver of Germa's might. They aren't like him, like Zeph, like Luffy, and they aren't people that his loved ones would ever accept. The more Sanji resembles his Vinsmoke blood, the further he drifts from the Straw Hats. This is what plagues his mind, why he's so hesitant to use that power when it's not a compromise to defend others. Yet, what about making a compromise for himself? Is this not the same man who's finally found his own value? Well, that brings us to this ultimatum, one spurred on by a genetic awakening. Sanji is forced into a state he can't conveniently hop in and out of like with the raid suit. A permanent change befalls him, one more alike his siblings than the technology they don. If an iron body comes first, then what precedes it is surely emotional absence. And for a man as kind and passionate as Sanji, this above all else is the worst possible fate. He runs away from this potentiality, paralleling when he flees from his family. And similar to his personal journey thereafter, during this frantic sprint toward distortion, he's unable to see himself when doubt rears its ugly head. Did I hit a woman? A contemplation he'd never dream of hearing resounding in his head. Yet it is his current reality. No matter how much it resembles the family he despises, Sanji must accept this change. But that doesn't mean he has to accept a potential inevitability. If further bouts as Stealth Black will eventually end with him losing the thing that fuels his fire, he can say no more. Sanji does the very thing he should have done before. Look at himself first. Had he done this at the beginning of the fight with Queen, he would have surely donned the raid suit. However, this misstep has stumbled him right into an even better decision, one finalized with a call to a fellow wing. Where before against Kuma, Sanji acted in blind selflessness that would have ended with the Straw Hats losing a permanent pivotal piece, now he asks the man who vetoed his toxic sacrifice back then to do the opposite, to kill him if he ceases to be the person their captain believes in. A selfish request, yet it portrays how much he values his current self. If the man Luffy fought so hard to get back was the pathetic pleading friend of back then, Sanji would light a flame symbolizing the strength of his preceding actions to escape that nightmarish wonderland. He would ignite his feelings in a hellfire of passion, showcasing what can be fostered by staying true to himself, just as he did after finally confiding in Luffy on that day. He accepts his heritage, accepts the invasive change it brings, and accepts both his strengths and weaknesses. He swells them all up and fans them into a blue hue of searing heat. Flames he can only endure because of his past, and only produce because of his present development. It is these things that enable him to sear away one of the blockades, impeding a future dawn. This pinnacle of emotional fire not only gives Sanji tremendous strength, but restores his observational clarity. Now, he can see he'd never be the man who would strike a woman. The real culprit is the dinosaur mocking a heritage that no longer affects Sanji. So, he does away with a vestige of that despicable science, and lets his past scars fly with him. And now, these words are no longer merely things he tells himself to cope with a possibility, but a concrete reality he cements with this victory. I am not Vinsmoke Sanji, warrior of science. I am Blackleg Sanji, cook of the future Pirate King's crew. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed what I had to say, and click that bell so you don't miss an upload from me. Thank you so much to my top supporters, Sensei Krolon, Yo-Yo Man, and Dre. Well, that's all folks. Spice Boy, out.